Hey, it's David, and you're listening to the Tonebase Classical Guitar Podcast. Really happy to have Emmanuel Sowicz on the show today, who's a fantastic performer, arranger, and tonebase artist. If you're still not a member at Tonebase, head on over to tonebase.co and use the promo code podcast-3 for $15 off of your subscription. Let's go ahead and jump right into things. First time I discovered Emmanuel's playing was a beautiful performance of Scarlatti on Tonebase's YouTube page. So I thought we'd play another sonata of his. This is Sonata K-178 in D major, and this is transcribed by David Russell.
I kind of have one general kind of principle, as it were, when I'm doing an arrangement or a transcription, which I consider to be slightly different things. But it's that hopefully you should be able to convey the expressive effect of the original medium on the new instrument. So that, having said that, it doesn't necessarily mean like copying all the notes like of the original. It means like achieving more or less the same effect. So on the transcription side, which I'd consider something a little bit more literal, when you sometimes, I'm sure you might have found this yourself, like you see a piece and you say, oh yeah, that would totally be doable on guitar. You just need to like write it out and maybe choose a slightly different key. And I think that's closer to the Scarlatti in a way, where I only required like a few adjustments to make it work. But then it's more about like, how do you finger it? And I really, really strongly believe that fingering is like everything, in the sense that it's the medium through which you convey musical ideas, and like you can have very kind of poetic notions about how you should play a piece, but if your fingerings don't physically allow you to do that, or play like a particular passage like legato as you want it, or if you need to be jumping around, then it's very difficult to do that. So I think the actual process of finding fingerings is also one that deserves like a lot of attention. And then if it's Scarlatti again, it's like the ornamentation. Well, how do you deal with that? You can go like the guitar route, like just do ornaments as however you find it more comfortable, or you can say I'm going to imitate the harpsichord, or am I going to mix both types of trills, like double string trills or single string trills, and what's going to be my criteria for that. So you can kind of ask yourself an awful lot of questions like about something which is, like in this case, it was really short. I think it's no longer than 3 minutes with repeats, you know? So that means it's like effectively like a minute and a half or a minute and 40 seconds of music that you're going through and trying to arrange, you know? Transcribe, I should say. But so yeah, on the other side of the spectrum, let's say there's a piece which is originally for cello and piano by Rachmaninoff. Let's say it's a dance, Oriental dance, I think. Okay. And it's a really fascinating piece. It's really beautiful, very nostalgic and kind of atmospheric. And it has this passage in the middle, which will be, it's almost superfluous to kind of describe in words. That would probably fail. But it has these figures in the piano, very high up, and doing like little trills with tons of notes. And on the piano, that sounds beautiful because it's so resonant and like pianissimo and kind of haunting. Yeah. You know? And then the cello has a very, very beautiful, lush melody. If you do that on the guitar, I transcribed this for 3 guitars for a guitar trio.
Okay. If you I was trying to think, is that even possible on one guitar? Woo, you got me worried for a second.
And it's kind of an unusual thing like Rachmaninoff on guitars. But anyways, if you try to transcribe this passage of music, like literally doing all the notes, it just sounds so busy. And also it kind of covers the register in which one of the guitars will be doing the melody, and it just didn't work. So in the end, what I did was just find like harmonics I could do within the harmony of that effect of the piano, and realize, well, actually that is drastically different in terms of the actual notes that we're playing. We're not playing, you know, these semi-demi-quavers ornaments, but in a way it achieves the expressive effect in a much more genuine way. So I think that's kind of going on the further side of kind of arranging. Actually changing the material
and making it fit for the instrument,
but in a way to kind of capture the original spirit. So it's like, I don't know, I was very inspired by people like Nicolas Harnoncourt, who you might or not have heard of. He was a pioneer of what I like to call the hip movement, which is the historically informed or historically inspired performance movement, as some like to call it. And this was a guy who played in Karajan's orchestra. I think he was like a cello in the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, if I'm not mistaken. And at the same time, I think it was 1954, he founded this group called Concentus Musicus Vien. And it was a group of buddies, you know, they got together and played with early instruments. And he started reading sources and like, how did they play music like hundreds of years ago? And what's really interesting is that being one of the kind of fathers, as it were, of the historically informed performance movement, of the early music movement, which is now kind of almost like a music business or arena of its own within this classical music thing. He had kind of the freedom to go and conduct, I don't know, let's say the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, you know, when he was already an established like early music specialist, you know, you could say, or the chamber orchestra of Europe, or like Concertgebouw Amsterdam, like all these amazing, pretty like mainstream
very
orchestras.
Established, yeah.
So in a way, I think it speaks tons for the fact that it's not the actual medium that you use, as it were, or like it's more about the concepts and the ideas behind it, you know, to kind of achieve the expressive idea that you might be trying to convey. Yeah. So I think it doesn't matter so much if you play like exactly with all the rules, you know, of Baroque performance or something. It's more about kind of trying to reach the spirit, as it were, of what you're trying to convey. So,
and not letting technical limitations of a certain instrument get in the way of the musical direction.
Yeah, or in a way, like you can like try to make the most of the idiom of your instrument. Like everything, I think, has pros and cons. Like things it struggles to do, which of course we can try and overcome, and that's what kind of brings guitar like technical level to such an amazing kind of standard nowadays. But also like realizing there are certain things which are just comes more naturally to the instrument and maybe more beautifully, you know. So trying to, instead of think of it as, well, damn, like I can't do this, on the guitar. It's like, but perhaps I could do this other thing, and it can sound like wonderful. So for example, the Rachmaninoff thing I said, it's like I could give up and say, well, I can't play that passage of the piano. I just won't transcribe it, or try to find an alternative. Of course, it's a lot easier when it's in like just full-on arrangement of something which is, let's say, a pop tune or something. Well, not that I do many pop tunes, but or like a folk, let's say, a folk tune. Then you have the freedom of just choosing like all the best things that the guitar can do so wonderfully. So I kind of like that rather free approach of not being constricted.
Just being stuck in
exactly.
The exact notes.
It's more about like possibilities of what you can do. So another transcription I did, which was lots of fun. It was, I think, only the first movement of a Haydn piano sonata for guitar and flute.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that was lots of fun because there's certain bits in this movement which it kind of reaches, I think, is like a first degree, like in second inversion, like the typical chord where you'd normally have like a cadenza or something, and it just felt like, well, maybe just write out like a flute cadenza, and it's like, which isn't in the original, but in a way it's very much within the spirit of the time. And also, like, it's very easy to have a stuffy kind of rather regal conception of big composers like, I don't know, Haydn. There's this notion, I don't know if it's so much here in the UK, but at least in Chile, of the kind of Papa Haydn, kind of the father of the sonata form, or the symphony and whatever. It sounds like a bit stuffy, like, and yes, he wrote 100 and I don't know how many symphonies and whatever. But actually, like, I think he had like a great sense of humor. He incorporated a lot of like folk Hungarian music in his compositions.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure him, or I don't know, Mozart, would have been like just the coolest, easiest going like guys to hang out with, like just having a beer with or something.
At the end of the day, they were just people. I think sometimes, and of course we should think very highly of these composers. They are amazing composers. Absolutely. But I think we kind of forget that they were just people as well. And they would probably go out and have a nice drink or a meal and have a nice time after a performance. And I feel a lot of them would be quite malleable in today's era, if within reason, if people were approaching them about making these arrangements. I think a lot of them would be really interested and flattered in a sense. I mean, if we think of modern day composers, maybe I just know more kind of younger composers and maybe not as many well-established composers, but I think they would be really excited at the prospect of different instrumentations for certain pieces. Haydn has got to be beautiful on guitar, actually. I don't think I've heard much of it to begin with. Common. Yeah.
I heard
Is that kind of the inception for the idea that you just hadn't really heard Haydn on the guitar?
There's this sonata I just really loved, which is so funny, in D major. I don't remember the exact catalog number now, but I just loved hearing it. It was like, well, I was playing with a flautist, with Amy Yule, and she was this amazing flautist I studied with at the academy. And I just thought it would be fun to do, basically. But yeah, like what you just mentioned about like these composers perhaps being really open or interested, or I'd like to think they might have been like a lot more creative and kind of relaxed about their own music than we might be today. So, for example, there's this amazing musicologist and pianist called Robert Levin, who I think he teaches at Harvard. He came to the Academy, the Royal Academy of Music, at some point, and he talks about. He gave an example of Mozart. It was either a sonata or a set of variations, I think it might have been. And he gives two examples. One edition where it's what we all know as, the kind of original composition. And then another edition, which was, according to him, presumably done under the supervision of Mozart, where he just like embellishes everything, like to the point where you kind of think like, what is this? Like, it's just too many notes. Exactly. And he says, well, if this edition didn't exist, like the ornamented one, and anyone nowadays had done such an extravagant ornamentation, they would have said, "Oh no, that's tasteless. That's completely out of like Mozart's style or whatever he would have done." But actually, it's like you realize a lot of these people would have probably had so much more freedom about their own music than we might give them nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, there's this whole kind of idea of like a canonic, you know, interpretation which you really shouldn't mess with. And in a way, I think historically informed performance is cool because it messes with that, you know. It kind of does quirky things, you know, to maybe provoke, or maybe just because they genuinely find it more interesting. But in any case, I find it fascinating and a constant source of kind of inspiration, really, of not just being bogged down with the right way to do it. It's like, if anything, I think we can learn from historically informed practices. It's not like putting ourselves in the box of what we are allowed to do, but rather having tools and all these like ideas with which to expand our interpretation.
Yeah.
You know? So it's not constraining yourself; it's actually liberating yourself from the stuff that you just generally do, like by instinct or tradition. Like you can actually be reflective of, how am I playing this? How can I introduce these cool practices that were part of, you know, of that time, and you get some really interesting results. Like, I don't know, for example, inegale notes, like we're very used to kind of playing long short dan da-dan da. If you have like quavers written in some kind of French courant or something, like it's done da-dan da-dan. But sometimes it was very common to do it the opposite way, like da-dan da-dan. Like it's a very simple example. Yeah, or like the whole idea of articulation, like how you can join notes that are close together, you know, do them legato, and then jumps do them more articulately, and suddenly you realize, oh, that can bring out different dimensions in music. But it's all of these are like little tools which you can kind of just take inspiration from and use them as they might help you convey your own concept, your own idea of the music. I don't think it's like something to be bogged down by. That's the main thing.
Think of it as an opportunity instead of a limitation.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
When I was a student thinking of doing competitions, I kind of looked for everything I could get my hands on, like a book of someone, you know, written on competitions, like, oh, yeah, this will be like, this will teach me how to do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know there's a lot of people kind of interested in knowing about that. The thing about competitions, which I found like the most useful lesson, coming from someone who isn't really a big competition person as myself. I mean, I don't think I've done like more than maybe 10 overall or something like that, which I don't think is a particularly large number. And of different types, like some very small kind of school competitions. It includes the stuff I did when I was like 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And then the slightly kind of higher profile things I've done in later years. But the one thing that has helped me the most is this kind of notion of how much do you emotionally depend on an external judgment, you know? How much do you emotionally depend on a competition? Because regardless of whether you win or not, like how much you do depend can affect like how positive or how negative it can be for you. Let's say you really depend, like you feel your self-worth is kind of attached to how you do in a competition. So if you do badly, of course, it kind of depresses you and you feel, maybe I'm not such a good guitarist, should I give up or whatever, especially if you're like starting off, you kind of think, oh, this is not for me, maybe. But even if you do well, it's like you think, oh yeah, wow, I'm amazing, you know, I just won this huge competition, like I should be playing everywhere now. That's not a healthy result, like either, you know, if you have this inflated sense of self-worth just because someone else told you were amazing, you know, there'll be, I think, as far as I've heard, like in careers of many like seasoned performers, like there are always ups and downs, you know, and there'll be a point where perhaps you're not doing that well, or you kind of have a few months that you're feeling, you know, I'm not my best shape or whatever. And what's going to happen then when you're relying so heavily on other people's judgments about your playing, you know? So in that sense, it's kind of a very simple lesson, but just to be a bit more detached emotionally from the result doesn't mean you don't care and you don't try your best, but it means, you know, you're just aware that even if you win a competition, there are probably, you know, dozens, hundreds of other guitarists out there who can probably play, if not everything, like at least several things like better than you. Mm-hmm. in the same way that there are perhaps other people who are at a slightly kind of earlier stage in their development, you know? So I don't think it's something to be particularly kind of proud of in a kind of egoistic way, like, yeah, I'm amazing, or no, I'm not that good, you know? You kind of understand that everyone is at a different stage in their development musically and in their career as well. So I think that's the one single thing I've learned to be the most useful, is that if you get into a competition, it's mostly dealing with yourself rather than with others. Yeah. You know, so
just go in there and play your heart out. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And kind of try to be better than yourself. That's my challenge that I've tried to. It's what's helped me kind of survive it, really. Yeah. I don't think I could stand like going to a competition and thinking, oh gosh, like half of those guys are my friends and I feel play better than me. It's like, because, you know, they are your friends. You appreciate their playing and you usually really like it. So it's like, if you have that approach, you can kind of start doubting yourself a lot. So it has to be much more about, well, okay, so this is my standard. I just want to push myself that bit further, and what can I do to achieve that? And if you succeed in that, then the results are really secondary, in the sense that if you feel you played better than you did, you know, before it, you spent like 2 months preparing like really hardcore, then that in itself is a victory. If on top of that you happen to win, then well, fantastic. You maybe get
buy yourself a beer.
Yeah, exactly. and it's been cool. So like I think for me the most exciting, like the biggest competition for me was probably the one I did in November 2017. It's called Dr. Luis Sigall International Music Competition, which is held in Viña del Mar in Chile.
Okay.
So interestingly, I got to watch this competition when I was growing up, when I was studying at the conservatory. I think I started studying when I was about 13 years old.
Okay.
And I would go watch this competition. And the interesting thing as well is that it's open to violin, cello, piano, voice, and guitar, and they rotate rather every year. So you only get each of these instruments every 5 years.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So I started.
So they aren't competing all at once.
They're not competing between instruments. It's
gotcha.
like this year's guitar, this year's piano, this year's whatever. And
but it's a once every 5 years type opportunity for each instrumentalist. Yeah.
And I remember I was really excited to go watch these amazing cellists and violinists, and suddenly the guitar version was there, and you think, oh gosh, these are amazing players. It's like, I'll never do something like this. And sure enough, like 10 years later, like, I find myself applying, mainly because, they're one of the very few, I think it's, if not the only, one of only 2 competitions in Latin America, which is part of the World Federation of International Music Competitions. So they usually kind of uphold a very high standard of organization. And all the people who are selected from videos, like I think it was a 30-minute video you had to send in of your repertoire, have their travel and their expenses and accommodation paid for, which was very attractive for me living in the UK, because it meant like I had a free trip over back home.
Yeah.
So I was like,
it's a long flight to pay for. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like, I made the video. I was like not convinced at all. I was telling my partner, then now my wife, like, oh, I really don't think I should send it in. And she was like, well, send it. At the very least, you get a free trip home.
Yeah.
And I did it. I got it. And then I was like, gosh, now I really should practice. And it was like, okay, let's just do it seriously. Had a few months when I found out that I was going. And the amount of repertoire was a bit intimidating, because it was 3 live rounds. So the first one was something like 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, including a set piece, including some Bach, Latin American music, etc.
Do you remember what the set piece was?
Yes, it was a piece by Juan Antonio Sanchez, the composer I mentioned earlier, this Chilean composer.
Very cool.
And it was a set of variations, interestingly, also by Violeta Parra, on a theme by Violeta Parra, this popular songwriter. So then there was the second round, which added up to about 40 to 45 minutes, including like big 20th century sonata and Scarlatti and this Spanish music.
New music compared to the first round.
Yeah, it's always different. The video you can choose from the live repertoire, but the actual live rounds are different.
Each round is totally different repertoire.
Yeah, and then the third live round with orchestra, you had to prepare 2 concertos. And
Two?
Yeah. And they would choose one, basically. So they'd say, okay, like you passed, tomorrow you need to rehearse, or like in 2 days it might have been, you need to play this concerto. And you're just like inside begging that it's the one that you practice that little bit more.
Why do they do that? Is it because they want to make sure there's a couple different concertos being performed, or do they just want to make it a little more challenging in regards to...
I think it might be both things, because I have seen a cello edition of this competition where they just chose all 3 of them the Tchaikovsky Rococo variations. It was like,
oh, okay.
Come on, like why would you do that if everyone
had
a
varied program?
Yeah, but in this case we had 3 different concertos. I think it's a bit of both. Yeah, exactly.
So which ones did you prepare, and what did you have to play?
I prepared Aranjuez and Castelnuovo Tedesco concerto. Yeah, and I got to play Castelnuovo Tedesco concerto, which I love. So I count myself as lucky. It was like, that's the one I wanted to play.
Yeah.
And it was like recorded and later broadcast live. So it was like it felt like a lot of pressure. And I remember, I think I kind of broke down after the first day, and like physically, like I started getting this cold after traveling, and it turned into a really bad flu, and I had like muscle ache. So
oh no.
And it was to the point where there was this one day where I couldn't like get out of bed. I think I practiced only 30 minutes, like in great pain, because I just felt like my body was giving up.
Yeah.
But in a way, after I passed through to the final, it was like to hell with it. It was like I just didn't care about anything. It was just go for it, whatever. And then I played, and it was like a very liberating feeling when you feel like you have like everything against you, and you kind of try that bit harder. And so that was like for me one of the most significant competition experiences of the few I've had.
And you won it?
Yeah.
Okay. I got the prize. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make it clear for listeners.
Which was
That's
really
fantastic.
It was really special because it meant I got an invitation over, like a second invitation only a few months later, to go to Frutillar, which is a beautiful city down in the south of Chile. And for those who might not know it, it's basically next to a beautiful lake with a volcano in the far distance. And they have this amazing theater called Teatro del Lago, built by a German family. And this is a theater that they've managed to get up to a huge status, like Yo-Yo Ma or like Maxim Bengerov performed there, and they have a beautiful hall for like 1,400 or 1,500 people. And I got to perform the Tedesco concerto there with the Chilean National Youth Orchestra, which was really nice, and got to do a recital like 2 days after, I think, and it was just a lovely visit, a second visit to Chile. So in a way, it was fantastic, because it meant not only like winning a competition, the usual things, and getting a concert, but getting a concert like in a place where I'm
That's
from,
so meaningful.
and getting to go back home, visit family. So that was really special.
Yeah.
And
sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting hearing about kind of the mental mindset at the end of it. Not saying being sick helped at all, and I think, quite frankly, it's amazing.
I actually think it did.
Well, mentally speaking,
because
then you just decided to just do it and not
you have so much more drive.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really goofy parallel to make. I'm an awful golfer, but I love playing. But it's such
probably
a mental...
10 times better than me.
Oh, yeah. Probably not. We're probably even then. But it's such a mental thing, and it's kind of every shot's a performance. And you hit your ball, and then you got to walk over for the next shot. And it's you're only thinking about it for 3 minutes, about that shot, how you're going to mess it up and everything. But I find it, if I just go and hit it and not overthink it, just do it.
Yeah.
Not to say it's always a perfect shot or anything, but it usually goes much smoother. And I think sometimes with performing, and I've been very lucky that I haven't suffered too much from performance anxiety. Everyone does to a certain extent. I haven't been too cursed by that, but I think sometimes you just got to go for it, because when you're talking about it, if you're overthinking things, you're playing at a competition against your friends, and you think your friends are better, then you start down your playing, and then you're warming up, and you think, oh, this sounds bad, and my tone's scratchy, and all this. If you just do it,
definitely.
Just think of the music and listen to it.
Yeah, whatever helps you like let go. And just it's always better.
Just let the music take you. Yeah. So how long have you been doing Eurostrings for?
So Eurostrings, it's a 1 year thing. So after winning the London Guitar Competition in October last year, I think. The first festival I did must have been sometime around March, I think.
Okay.
And then it lasted all the way through till July, where there were about 6 or 7 festivals that I attended.
Oh, wow.
As a Eurostrings artist. So yeah, it was really exciting.
Yeah. And were you performing at those festivals or attending as a student?
So the deal with Eurostrings artists is it's basically the winners of each of these festivals, as you might know already. And they carry us around. They get us to do a series of activities which are really fun. Usually it involves playing chamber music with our colleagues who are traveling with us. It'll involve doing a little bit of teaching, also taking a masterclass with some great artists, like, I don't know, I had with Goran Krivokapic, or some others had with Ricardo Gallen, I think with Assad Brothers, David Russell, etc. Like those kind of people. A little bit of outreach, which occasionally can be like really, really special experiences playing for people who usually don't have access to classical music or don't even really know what it is. So there's this fascinating experience in Italy, for example, in Motola, where we visited a place where they had a lot of people with Down syndrome, and it was like the sweetest experience ever because they were just like so open to like listen to us, and the place they had like prepared them really well in terms of telling them what they were going to listen to. I think they did like some kind of manual things, like little guitars that they how do you say it? Like they when you would do it with your hands, like clay. I think clay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like little sculptures for us. And it was like really sweet, and it was very moving, like much more than just a regular concert. Yeah, so stuff like that, it was really interesting. And besides that, you just get a lot of contact with artistic directors of festivals. They kind of telling you, could you play this kind of music or don't play this kind of music because of the audience and blah, blah, blah. So it kind of gives you an experience about how artistic directors of festivals might be thinking, and it's the kind of people you might be dealing with later, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, and also you do get a few solo concerts. And sometimes they're like really, really nice venues. So it was a cool experience.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So you went to 7 different festivals.
I think, if I count correctly, it must have been about.
Do you remember them offhand, or is it hard to keep track at this point?
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, let's see. The first one, I think, must have been the Szeged International Guitar Festival, where David Pavlovic is the artistic director, with a stopover in Subotica, which is Serbia. So it's really nearby.
Oh, okay.
And it was really cool because there was a lot of taking trains involved, and, and it was a wonderful way to start. The other one I did, I'll start counting with my fingers, see if I got them all. Is in Finland, in Tampere. That was just amazing, like the white night and everything. And the organizer Tommy there was fantastic. He took us out. Kind of just to see places, and there was a midnight cruise. Just really lots of fun. Tallinn International Guitar Festival in Estonia was also particularly memorable because we got to go to the Arvo Part Center, which was recently inaugurated. I think was it the year before, late in 2018, and it's basically a center which was built very near where Arvo Part lives. And Arvo Part is like one of the most amazing, at least for me, like contemporary composers. Yeah. I think he's the most performed living composer.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, he is amazing.
Exactly. And kind of so many people from around the world seem to enjoy his music. So it was really beautiful to get to play in what was a beautiful hall, and got to meet him as well. And amazingly, there was like a surprise visit. Sting was visiting Arvo Part, like showing his admiration probably, or like just getting to hang out with this person he admired. I think he had a concert later that evening in Tallinn. And amazingly, like a few of us got to perform for them, like for Arvo Part and Sting. So that was.
So you performed for Arvo Part and
Sting.
Yeah.
It was like the coolest thing ever, and it was completely unexpected. Like it was funny because Tiit, the artistic director, he was like really busy going around, and I asked him a question, and he kind of ignored me, and I felt like, oh, like why is he ignoring me? And then suddenly I realized he says to everyone, like, come over, like there's something you need to see. And it was Sting. And then it's like I realized, oh yeah, he was just like aware of all this amazing stuff happening. And he said, okay, who wants to play for for them, and I just kind of rushed, got my guitar and played something.
You got to do it, yeah. Do you remember what you played? Or
yeah, actually, I played an arrangement of mine of a song by a Chilean author called Violeta Parra. She was the most amazing popular musician and kind of folk musician. She also collected a lot of music traditional music from Chile. And this was one of her original compositions called Gracias a la Vida, which translates rather unpoetically in English as thank you to life or thanks to life. But it's a very beautiful, actually a sad melody, which she wrote 1 year before committing suicide, which makes it kind of particularly poignant in a way. But yeah, that was just something, because I'm half Chilean, half British, I thought, well, it might be cool. Sting is a songwriter. He might perhaps know who Violeta Parra is.
Was he receptive to it?
Yeah, I mean, we got to kind of chat with him briefly afterwards, and he was very warm. He was gracious enough to let me take a picture with him.
Yeah. Well, you just played to him. Nice. You deserve it. I mean, I've heard he's very interested in classical music and classical guitar. Of course, Andy Summers, the guitarist from The Police. I mean, I know The Police aren't playing together now. He's a avid classical guitarist, and he's done duos with Ben Verdery, and apparently he goes to a lot of different classical guitar concerts in the Los Angeles area. But there's a funny story with Sting, actually, with my old teacher, Bill Cannengeiser. Do you know about this? Or?
No, I don't. I'd be really interested to hear, actually.
Okay, now I'm going off a little bit. I apologize, but it's funny. So Bill arranged, when he was younger, he arranged the Bach chaconne into E minor with the intention, when you have that, when it's in D minor, that A drone in the second minor section, being able to play that as an open B, just to open things up. And I don't know what happened and how Sting heard about it, but Bill was backstage. And I forgot, I'm not telling the story very well. I forgot if it was a Police concert or anything like that. But he gave the arrangement to Sting, which was written out by hand. It was before notation softwares and everything was really readily available. And he gave it to him, and Sting was very happy to have it and receptive. And then when Bill walked out, he realized, oh, shoot, I didn't make myself a copy. So Sting has got the only arrangement out there that Bill made for the chaconne. I think he still has it in his head, but it's like he's not going to ask him for it back. It's just funny how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, if you have one person you could like give your original score to.
I guess so.
I'd probably choose Sting.
Yeah. I think I would make an exception for that. Speaking of Chilean repertoire, do you mix, or maybe not mix, but incorporate that music into your classical programs a lot?
Absolutely. I mean, this Violeta Parra arrangement I did is perhaps an example of more popular music. But actually, I'm very keen on working with young composers, young Chilean composers particularly, who are friends of mine, people I've perhaps studied with or have friendships with over time. And it's lots of fun to basically just anyone who's willing to do it kind of say, hey, you interested in writing a piece for guitar? And take it from there. And more often than not, like you get really interesting music that is worth showing, you know? So having this dual kind of personality or identity in a way, being half British, half Chilean, more or less in equal parts. My father is British, my mom's Chilean. I've lived more or less half my life in each part.
Yeah.
I speak both languages, although in each part I'm kind of recognized as a foreigner. So it's a bit sad, but like when I'm here, it's like, oh, I'm the Chilean guy. When I'm there, it's like, oh, he's the British guy. So in a way, it works to my advantage in the sense that I get to showcase or kind of bring together these two cultures in a certain way through my music. So I have, as I said, a lot of pieces I've worked on with composer friends from Chile, and I really enjoy playing those here in the UK. And the opposite is also true. Like whenever I have some British music, I really enjoy playing it in Chile, and it kind of makes for something interesting. So I like that kind of duality. But yeah, most recently, I think one of the most interesting projects I did was a commission to a Chilean composer called Juan Antonio Sanchez, who is very interesting because he has one foot in each world of folk music and classical music. He studied classical guitar, but he grew up playing lots of traditional Latin American instruments like zampoña, this like I guess you'd call it a pan flute.
Okay.
Guitars, charangos, whatever, you know. And so he's very much into traditional music and bringing it to the classical area in a way. He publishes his scores. We classical guitarists, can kind of play that in Chile. He's a big figure. And I asked him, would he compose something based on British music? And originally the idea was to do something with the Beatles, and I wrote to the people in charge of like the copyrights, very excited, could you do this? We'll pay, for using these songs and whatever. And I think that must have been 6 months ago. I haven't yet heard a reply. So we kind of soon gave up and just realized it's easier to go with traditional folk melodies. So I just got him to write a fantasy on 3 traditional English songs, folk songs. And it was lots of fun. I got some funding from the Anglo-Chilean Society, appropriately, which is based in London and tries to kind of establish a cultural exchange between UK and Chile. And it was premiered just a few weeks ago at the London Guitar Festival. So,
very cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of nice. And it was very kind of Juan Antonio Sanchez and very selfish of myself to kind of just use as an excuse to kind of connect these 2 countries. So.
No, it's fantastic. Because for myself, I haven't heard too much Chilean folk music, so to get some of that influence into a classical guitar program, that's fantastic. I know that was using English folk songs. Do you play a lot of traditional music as well?
No, I don't think I'd be lying if I said I did. It hasn't really been part of my, let's say, upbringing to kind of play folk music, or it's something I've kind of gotten myself into through friends, perhaps. I have several friends I grew up with studying guitar in Chile, very good friends who had a great passion for people like Violeta Parra, or Victor Jara is another very well-known songwriter. And these are people who also have a very strong political relevance and meaning in culture, because they were part of the left wing politics in a time where it was very difficult to be left wing. In Chile, I'm not sure how much your listeners might be aware of this, but in Chile in 73 there was a coup. So the militaries basically took over government. They killed the president Salvador Allende, who was socialist, and they started persecuting a lot of artists and killing really people who were too close to the left, and actively supporting this or promoting basically Marxist or socialist politics. And Victor Jara was one of them. And it's a very sad story, because you see videos of him performing, and he's like the sweetest guy ever. The way he spoke, the way he sang is just so tender, and he played guitar like really well for a songwriter. He could do proper accompaniments, and he was tortured. He had his hands kind of bashed before they just decided to kill him, and in that order, for some reason they just really wanted to make him suffer. And it's really heartbreaking. And what's really worrying actually is that nowadays in Chile, like there is a big commotion socially, because since the military government, basically they installed capitalism or neoliberalism in its most kind of savage form. And over the years it's made the country kind of grow economically and everything, but it's also increased the inequality. So the poor sectors, areas of society have been really marginalized, and they're now kind of crying out and saying, well, we can't take it anymore. So now for the last, 5 or 6 weeks, there have been demonstrations on the street, like very fair demonstrations of the Chilean people. In Santiago, for example, a city of almost 7 million people, there was the biggest march ever of, I think it was 1.2 million people, if you can imagine that. Like almost, what's that, a sixth or a fifth of the population out on the street, just saying, something needs to change. And it's still very much an issue. I mean, more than 20 people have died. They got the militaries out on the street for a period of a week or a bit more as well, which had devastating consequences. And there still doesn't seem to be a clear path to resolving that. So in a way, I've kind of gone on a tangent a little bit, but these figures like Violeta Parra or Victor Jara, if maybe 2 months ago they were symbols of like something that should never happen again, the repression of the people by its own state, they somehow acquire a great relevance nowadays, saying, well, actually this is happening again. It's like, and it really shouldn't. So So yeah, it's somehow I've started valuing this even more than I did before through my friends, like just in the past few
during
weeks
these
or months.
times.
And it's
absolutely,
so it's I mean it's a very small thing that we can do as artists, you know, in this huge kind of political context, the social movement. It's, you kind of feel a bit hopeless. So in a way, to have this tiny little outlet to say, well, you know, I do what I can is like it helps a lot, like on a very personal, emotional level.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for being on the show. And thank you to all listeners for tuning in this season. This is the final episode for this season before the holidays, but fear not, we've got a really exciting season 4 up and coming. We'll be making an official announcement soon. Until then, I hope you enjoy whatever holiday you celebrate. Have a happy new year. And I'm going to leave you with a beautiful performance that was done for Open Strings Berlin. This is Violeta Parra's Gracias a la Vida, arranged by Emmanuel. I'm David Steinhardt, and we'll see you next time for the Tonebase Classical Guitar Podcast.